He was the greatest right fielder who ever lived, a World Series MVP, a man with 3,000 career hits and 12 Gold Gloves. He died on a broken plane that mechanics had already written off, carrying supplies to people the government had abandoned. Roberto Clemente grew up in Carolina, Puerto Rico, the youngest of 7 kids, the son of a man who worked a sugarcane plantation. Starting at age 8, Roberto cut cane alongside his father in the harvest season, and in the last TV interview he ever gave, he talked about delivering milk cans for a penny a day and saving for 3 years just to buy a second-hand bike. He said he liked common people, workers, people who suffered. He said they see life differently than people who have everything. That upbringing never left him, and it would eventually cost him his life. He started drawing attention playing in Puerto Rico's amateur leagues as a teenager, and in 1954 the Brooklyn Dodgers signed him. But here's where it gets interesting. The Dodgers had no intention of actually playing him. They stashed him on their minor league roster and barely used him because there was a rule at the time that said any player given a bonus above $4,000 had to stay on the major league roster for the entire first season, or he'd be available for other teams to draft. The Dodgers paid Clemente $10,000 and then tried to hide him in the minors, hoping nobody would notice. The Pittsburgh Pirates, who had finished dead last in the National League that year, noticed immediately. They drafted him in 1954 and brought him to the major leagues in 1955, and he spent every single season of his career in Pittsburgh. From the beginning, Clemente was dealing with 2 fights at once, one on the field and one everywhere else. American sports writers in the 1950s and 60s would quote his Spanish accent phonetically in their columns, writing things like "me hit the ball hard" to make him sound ridiculous. Broadcasters and journalists tried to call him Bob or Bobby, as if Roberto was too much to ask, and every single time he corrected them. "My name is Roberto Clemente." He said it over and over, calmly and without apology, and eventually the world adjusted. He also played through a back injury from a car accident early in his career that would have ended most people's careers entirely, and when he sat out games because of it, writers implied he was soft, that he didn't have the toughness of his white teammates, that he was making excuses. He played through pain for nearly 2 decades. What he did on a baseball field, though, was genuinely hard to explain. He had 12 Gold Gloves as a right fielder, which ties Willie Mays for the most ever by an outfielder. Broadcaster Vin Scully once said Clemente could field the ball in New York and throw out a runner in Pennsylvania. He won 4 National League batting titles and finished with a career average of .317, and when people talk about the greatest arms ever to play the game, Clemente is always the first name. But the moment that defined him for the wider world came in October 1971, when the Pittsburgh Pirates faced the heavily favored Baltimore Orioles in the World Series. Clemente hit .414 across 7 games, hit 2 home runs, and was the reason Pittsburgh won. After the final out, he was brought in front of the cameras for a national television interview, with millions of people watching, at the peak of his career, and the first thing he did was speak in Spanish. He thanked his parents back in Puerto Rico before he said anything else. It was the first time Spanish had ever been spoken on national American television. That was Roberto Clemente telling you exactly who he was. Just over a year later, on December 23rd, 1972, a massive earthquake hit Managua, Nicaragua, killing thousands and leaving 250,000 people homeless. Clemente had been to Nicaragua before, had personal connections there, and he immediately started organizing a relief effort out of Puerto Rico. In the week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, he loaded 4 cargo planes full of supplies and sent them to Nicaragua. Then he heard what was happening on the other end. The Nicaraguan military was intercepting the aid and keeping it for themselves. The supplies weren't reaching the survivors. And Clemente, being Clemente, decided that if he personally went on the next plane, they wouldn't dare steal the cargo in front of him. The plane they chose was a Douglas the 600th 7 owned by a cargo operator who had been repeatedly cited for safety violations. The propeller blades had been bent in an incident less than a month earlier when the owner forgot to close a hydraulic pump and drove the plane into a drainage ditch. The exterior had been repainted, but the engine work had not been done. The plane was overloaded, carrying nearly 4,000 pounds more than it was rated to handle. On the night of December 31st, 1972, Roberto Clemente boarded that plane with 4 others. It took off from San Juan International Airport and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean less than a minute later, about a mile off the coast. His body was never recovered. Puerto Rico mourned for 3 days by government order. The Baseball Hall of Fame, which had a mandatory 5-year waiting period before any player could be inducted, waived the rule entirely. Clemente was voted in just months after his death, the first Latino player ever inducted. MLB renamed its humanitarian award after him, given every year to the player who best uses baseball as a platform to serve their community. His number 21 was retired by the Pirates and eventually across the entire Puerto Rican Baseball League. He was formally recognized as a national hero of Puerto Rico in 2022. He finished his career with exactly 3,000 hits. His last hit, in the final game of the 1972 regular season, was number 3,000 on the dot. He died 3 months later, at 38, aboard a condemned plane he chose to get on because the people who were supposed to help weren't helping, and he couldn't live with that. He said once, "Anytime you have an opportunity to make a difference in this world and you don't, then you are wasting your time on Earth." He meant it. That's how he lived, and in the end, it's how he died. If you want more stories like this, the ones history books skip over, subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a lot more where that came from.